Welcome back to The Explainer. You've probably heard the term stakeholder business thrown around a lot, but today we're going to go past the buzzwords. We're actually going to lay out the blueprint.
All right, before we jump in, just a quick note. This is the second part of our 10-part series. We're diving into a really in-depth research report from Virtualization Options LLC that covers the stakeholder business model, AI governance, and the whole legal side of things. So as you can imagine, what we're covering here is really just a high-level look. And of course, this is all for informational purposes, it's not legal advice, and it doesn't come with any kind of warranty.
Okay, so let's get right to it. We hear this term stakeholder business constantly, but what is one really? I mean, what's the actual blueprint that makes a company a stakeholder business? What are the core components, the very DNA that you just can't do without?
Okay, so the very first piece of this puzzle, and honestly, it's the most fundamental part, is all about changing who the business answers to. It really boils down to this one simple but totally profound question. Who actually counts?
And right there, that's the big mental shift. I mean, for decades, the only real question that mattered was, how will this affect our shareholders? But this model, it just blows that wide open. It says, no, we're responsible to all the parties, everyone affected by what we do. And you can see just how wide that net gets cast. It's not just the people inside the company, your employees, the management team, board members. It's also this whole ecosystem on the outside. Customers, suppliers, the communities where you operate, regulators, even environmental groups. The idea is everyone gets a seat at the table.
So, okay, if you're now accountable to all these different groups, it makes sense that the old way of keeping score just isn't going to work anymore, right? A report card that only looks at profit, it's not enough. Which brings us to the next big characteristic, the new scorecard.
This is a totally different ballgame when it comes to keeping score. The traditional scorecard we're all used to, it's laser-focused on financial returns. We're talking profitability, share price, quarterly earnings. But the stakeholder scorecard, that's more like a full dashboard. It's measuring a much broader sense of value. Things like social impact, environmental stewardship, and even how well your employees are doing.
All right, this next part is where it gets really interesting, I think. Because it's one thing to have these values, but how do you actually make them part of the company's DNA? How do you build them right into the decision-making engine? It's got to be more than just good intentions, right? It has to be a system.
Exactly. The model is defined by two key things: inclusive governance structures and a long-term orientation. This means you're creating actual systems to bring all those different voices to the table. And, critically, it forces a change in perspective, moving away from just short-term gains to focusing on long-term, sustainable success for everyone involved.
So instead of just top-down commands, you get a much more inclusive process. Think of it like a cycle. First, you have a real dialogue. You're actively going out and getting input from all those different stakeholder groups. Then, you actually incorporate that feedback. It has to genuinely shape your strategic planning. And finally, you have to balance it all, making decisions that weigh the immediate needs against the long-term benefit for society as a whole.
Okay, so a company can say it's doing all this stuff, but talk is cheap, right? How do we actually know it's for real? What's the accountability check? Well, that brings us to our final hallmark characteristic, and you could argue it's the most crucial one.
And here it is, transparency. The ultimate proof is a rock-solid commitment to detailed public reporting. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's about moving beyond promises and actually showing your work, providing verifiable proof that you're walking the walk.
The source material really hammers this point home. It says there needs to be regular, detailed disclosure on environmental, social, and governance, ESG performance. And that ESG part is key. It's the environment, it's social impact, and it's how the company is governed. Without that kind of detailed public reporting, the whole thing can feel like just empty words.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. We've looked at all the individual pieces of the blueprint, so what does it look like when we see the complete picture?
So here they are, the 5 core hallmarks. But the real key here is to see them not as a checklist, but as a system where each part reinforces the others. Think about it. Multi-stakeholder accountability forces you to have broader value metrics. Those metrics don't mean much without inclusive governance structures to act on them. The whole thing is guided by that long-term orientation, and it's all held accountable by transparency and reporting. It's a loop, and when it's all working together, you get an organization that's built for resilience, for trust, and for creating real, sustainable value.
And that, in a nutshell, is the core DNA of a stakeholder business. It really makes you think, doesn't it? So we'll leave you with a final thought. If this blueprint became the standard for all businesses, what's the biggest change you think you would see in the world?